Hi, my name is Cameron Tyler, and this is my first video log for the class English Composition 2. This is an overview of my rhetorical analysis paper that I wrote last week. So here we go. I chose to write on a paper called Bad to the Last Drop by Tom Standage that was published in the New York Times in 2008. So I started off in my first paragraph by talking about the writer's purpose. The bottled water he talks about how bottled water has become overused in America, and how he is not for it. He never comes out and says he is not for it, but it is obvious to tell that he is not for the use of bottled water. Bottled water has become a necessity to most Americans in their everyday life. This article primarily talks about the consumption of bottled water as opposed to using the water that is right under our noses at the kitchen sink. The author's first goal is to explain to the reader that there is not much of a difference in tap and bottled water. The author's second goal is to try and convince the reader that he or she should stop wasting their money on bottled water and donate. The author's last goal is to tell the reader that they should not only stop using bottled water, but donate that money that they would use for bottled water to a charity that will help those in developing countries or third world countries get clean water that they don't have, that we do have, but we don't even use. So it's actually pretty moving, inspired me to stop. And yeah, so my thesis in my first paragraph is this. By gaining the audience's confidence on his personal experiences and research with the topic, slowly building his case, and then grabbing and tugging at the reader's logic and emotions, Standage does an outstanding job in getting us to believe it is possible to forfeit bottled water. So that was my first paragraph. In my second paragraph, I talk about the writer's audience. He published this article in the New York Times, and New York is obviously a very diverse city. And it is a large city, so if you can start change in New York, where can't you start change? He was obviously successful because it reached me here in California, and like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed the article and found it very interesting. His target audience is anyone who drinks bottled water. That's very obvious throughout his paper, and because New York is so multicultural, there's no reason that if he can't impact change there, he can impact it anywhere. In the third paragraph, I talked about the author's use of logos, and the author most definitely supported his argument by the use of the structure of an argumentative essay. He gives evidence after evidence talking about how bottled water is not good and how we should not be using bottled water because it's either bad for the environment, it's not as clean as we think it is, different things like that. So I talk about how he lines his paper up with just evidence after evidence, and what his main claims are in the paper. And after analyzing all the research, one can come to the conclusion that obviously he's not for it, but they too probably are convinced just after his stats that he provides. In the fourth, I talk about the author's use of ethos. In this argumentative paper that Standage writes, it is clear to tell what side he is on without him ever actually having to come out and say what side he is on, and he does a good job convincing the reader that he knows what he's talking about and is an expert on the subject. The author ran several experiments himself that he talks about. He continues to build his paper with more and more statistics, and the intended audience will feel completely confused at the misperception that they had their whole lives on bottled water, and they will probably change their habits as well, like I have. The author's use of pathos in this paper shows that the author can have similar emotions that the reader has, and that's what my fourth paragraph is about, or my fifth, I'm sorry, excuse me. He talks about how he shows he cares about the environment. He talks about how people that are less fortunate should have water supply, and he basically pulls the reader to this side of his argument, and he does a great job, and the audience would obviously respond. Well, at least I did, and I could speak for probably most people in saying that he does a good job convincing the reader that they don't have to buy bottled water and they can start making this change. In my 6th paragraph, I talk about how he does, in fact, talk about counter arguments such as how people in third world countries should be the only ones allowed to use bottled water, so that's an exception. And he also touches on the convenience, and convenience of bottled water is definitely probably the primary reason that people drink it. And he also talks about like how drinking bottled water is more fashionable than carrying around something else. In my conclusion, I talked about how the author raised many strong points and not many weak points. He had a great argument and was very persuasive. So that is my interpretation of Tom Standage's Bad to the Last Drop. Thank you.